I was born to the Hunkpapa tribe of the Lakota Sioux in the Dakota Territory. It must have been 1832 or so, according to the white man's calendar. Life was good before the white man came. The Wasichu, as we called them, had not yet chased us out of the land that the Great Spirit gave us to enjoy. When I was born, I was given the name of Jumping Badger, but it did not stick. Instead, because of my deliberate ways, even as an infant, everyone called me Slow. I was blessed with my parents' affection and gentle but persistent instruction. Many of the games we played as children taught us the skills that would serve us well in later life. Young girls would play with dolls and toy teepees. In this way, they would learn how to build a real teepee once they grew up and learned about keeping a lodge. At the age of 14, I went with a party of warriors to search for Crow horses and scalps. We attacked the Crow braves, and I counted my first coup. Coup was when we would touch the enemy without their knowing it, and without killing them. It was a sign of bravery. An older warrior finished off the poor Crow. I was no longer called Slow. I was given the name of the Tonka Iotonka, or Sitting Bull. Like a buffalo sitting on its haunches, I would fight to the death. I was known as a singer of songs, and I wrote many songs myself. Many times when I was a young brave, I would play a song for a beautiful maiden, and in the stillness of the prairie night, she could hear it and know its meaning. "Meet me at the creek tomorrow," my flute would cry out. When I was a young man, I married a maiden that I had been courting. Her name was Lighthair. Then a sad thing happened. Not long after we were married, she died during childbirth, but she gave me a son. But at 4, he caught a disease and died. I grieved so much for my young son that I adopted my nephew, Wunbo, who was the same age as the son I had lost. I raised him as if he were my own son.
By the 1840s, the white man had begun to expand west and invade Indian land. The West offered cheap and sometimes free land, opening opportunities for new commerce and self-advancement. This, along with the government's mandate to expand its borders to the Pacific and thus secure strategic ports critical for economic and national growth, led to an exodus unparalleled in history.
I did not understand why they had to leave their own land to invade ours. I thought theirs must be a sad country with little game. If they had come only to hunt or trade, we would have made them welcome. But I feared they came to steal our hunting grounds away. If the white man is in need and comes peaceably, let him share our buffalo. There's enough to feed all the world. I had troubles in my household too. My 2 wives, Snow on Her and Red Woman, were constantly bickering, and I lost my patience with them. I threw Snow on Her out of my teepee, for I believed she was at fault. Then Red Woman became ill and died. Now I was left with no wife. A chief of my standing must have a wife, so later I acquired one. I offered Gray Eagle some of my best horses for the hand of his sister, Four Robes. She had an older sister, seen by the nation, who was a widow with 2 sons. Then Four Robes asked me to marry her sister too. Now I added 2 wives and 2 stepsons to my family. Four Robes and Seen by the Nation got along well and were good wives to me. In our world, the women ruled the household. They made the teepees and erected them. On dark nights, the many teepees of the village would have a soft red glow from the fires inside. It was beautiful to see.
On the Rosebud River, he began to perform a sun dance.
I had done it many times before and had performed very painful self-torture. It is our belief that we can only come into the presence of the Great Spirit through the suffering of the flesh. This was part of our life, going back to the Creator. I gave 100 flesh offerings from my arms. Then I made my prayers and danced for 1 day and 1 night. By the 2nd day, I became unconscious. And then, a vision came to me. I looked up and saw soldiers and Indians on horseback, coming down like grasshoppers, with their heads down and their hats falling off. They were falling right into our camp. The women were flying like birds, and the bullets were flying like bees.
Custer and his men were soon overtaken. No one knows exactly what took place during the battle. There is much speculation and contradiction, but no one will dispute the fact that in the end, and in less than an hour's time, Custer and 210 of his men fell to their deaths. There were no survivors. Sometime during the first week of May 1877, Sitting Bull crossed into Canada.
We were welcomed by the Canadians, but hungry, destitute, tired, and after being driven from our homeland, we could not get rid of the fear that the Americans might suddenly attack our village. One day, Major James Walsh arrived at our camp with 6 of his horsemen. We called him Long Lance because of the lances that he and his men carried. They were brave to come into our camp with only 6 men. I respected them for that. Long Lance was blunt but fair. He said to us that the Sioux were now in the land of the Great White Mother, and that her laws would protect every person, no matter what color they were. We had laid the groundwork for mutual respect between the Redcoats and the Hunkpapa. I took with me my young son, Crowfoot, who carried my rifle, and I told Brotherton, I surrender this rifle to you through my young son. I wish him to learn the habits of the whites and to be educated as their sons are educated. I wish to be remembered that I was the last man of my tribe to surrender my rifle. This boy has given it to you and now wants to know how he is going to make a living. I will fight no more. I do not love war. I have never been the aggressor. I fought only to defend my women and children. Therefore, I submit, but I do not wish to be shut up in a corral. It is bad for young men to be fed by the agent. It makes them lazy and drunken. All agency Indians I have seen are worthless. They are neither red warriors or white farmers. They are neither wolf nor dog. I wore a full eagle feather bonnet and a buckskin tunic with quillwork decoration. When reporters asked me how I liked my travels, I said to them, "I have had much pleasure, but I am very tired." There's a great difference between prairie travel on horse and foot and that of the wagons drawn by the iron horse.
He was a huge hit. In Canada, he was more famous than Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley. They called him the illustrious Indian general and statesman. But in the U.S., he was often booed and hissed at. Custer's demise was still fresh in the hearts and minds of most Americans.
I did not understand the ways of the white man. I have seen the villages where they lived, and I had seen the people in the streets begging for money because they were hungry. In our tribe, the rich took care of the poor. No one went hungry. No one had to beg for food. And they called themselves civilized and us savages.
He made a good deal of money on the tour and was allowed to sell his autograph for $1.50. But he gave away most of his money to the poor he encountered on city streets. And when he returned to the reservation, he gave money to help his people.
Adam Fortunate Eagle Nordwall, you are recognized as an outstanding Native American artist and activist. You have been prominent in effecting social and political change for Native Americans over the last 4 decades. Through your leadership during the occupation of Alcatraz that began in 1969, you were among the catalysts for changing government policy for Indian tribes into a policy of Indian self-determination. Your efforts contributed substantially to the goal of awakening public consciousness to the plight of Native Americans, as well as the work you have so successfully undertaken on behalf of the most significantly disadvantaged in our society. We are honored by your presence here and take great pride in being able to honor you as the State University of New York confers upon you the Doctor of Humane Letters.
When you look back, what I left on the reservation, the homes, most of them had no electricity, no running water. A lot of them had dirt floors. They were tar paper shacks. Trachoma and other kind of diseases was rampant, and malnutrition on the reservation was rampant because of the Depression. And yet here at the boarding school, in the dormitory, we had our own beds. We didn't have to sleep in a bunch like we did back at the reservation. We had our own individual cots, our own beds. We had electricity, we had running water, we had flush toilets, we had showers. I mean, it was a whole new life. And when I compare that life at the boarding school compared to the reservation, it was a wonderful change for me and for all of our kids, because malnutrition was rampant on the reservations. Health problems were rampant. So the boarding school did double duty, taking care of our health, taking care of our diet. By 1935, under the Collier administration, it was okay to be Indian, to speak your language, to do your ceremony, all of these wonderful things. One language that was forbidden, strictly forbidden, was profanity. No cussing. Profanity is not the traditional Indian way as it turned out. We didn't use profanity as the white man used it on the reservations. We would hurl insults against each other, but not cuss you out. The Sioux would call us Chippewa boys rabbit chokers. We would call them dog eaters. Well, that's the insult kind of thing. So but that was as far as it went, basically. Now, I never proposed to Bobby. I never asked her to marry me, and she never said yes or no to marriage when it was pitched to us by my brother. But we did go down to the jewelry store, and we've got a gold ring for her. Friday the 13th, they start calling around for a priest or justice of the peace, anybody. If for some reason we couldn't find anybody who was available until finally out over on the west side of Oklahoma City, they got a guy who's a justice of the peace advertised in the newspaper and the telephone book. So we scheduled an appointment with him, and all four of us got dressed up. Nothing fancy, we had nothing fancy, but we just dressed up in our nice clothes, and we took off, looking for that Justice of the Peace office. And the only thing we could find on that street was a junkyard. But we look at the number, it's the number of the Justice of the Peace. So we went inside the junkyard. I mean, there was line after line of used tires hanging off a cable, looked like Christmas decorations, only junkyard style, old tires. We go into the shed, just loaded with junk, and yep, he's the Justice of the Peace, and he'll conduct a marriage. Now, this setting is so ridiculous that Bobby and Eva just giggled almost all the way through the ceremony until we finally said, "I do, you're man and wife," you know, and that was it. Then, so we're married in a junkyard. The medicine was good. My seeing her at the chow line at breakfast showed good judgment on my part, because now I have a lifetime mate, 60 years. And that evening back where Bobby and I stayed, there was a call. The Vatican, 11 o'clock tomorrow morning? Wow, we're gonna go to the Vatican. So here we go already again. We go to the Vatican. Now I set my spear aside, my discovery spear. I don't think it'd be welcome. And in the inner sanctum of the Vatican, I'm introduced to the Pope. And as I walk forward in measured steps, the Pope raises his hand to me. And okay, so I have this beautiful silver and turquoise ring. I raise my hand to him. There was a gasp in the Vatican, the cardinals, the bishops, the aides. Oh my God, there's going to be an international incident between His Holiness and the Indian. But the Pope broke the thing. He just blinked a couple times, then he got the humor of it. And he broke out into the biggest grin, and he just took me by the hand, and there we are. In our picture, it shows the two of us holding hands as we talked. And he said, you know, he didn't say, you know, he said, I've read a great deal about the American Indian, and I know what you are doing. I said, thank you, my son. And so that ended our papal visit in the Vatican. What a great tribute, what a great honor. So I am, by international law, the discoverer of a land called Italy. Instead of pushing Indians on the reservation, now the government was shipping Indians off the reservations to 8 main centers, cities throughout the United States. And to emphasize that and move it along, in 1958, they established the Indian Relocation Program to give federal funds and one-way tickets for Indians on the reservation who signed up for relocation. They would go to places like Oakland, where they had a relocation center. They were, in turn, set up to find employment. Now, once those relocated Indians got their first paycheck, it didn't matter if it was temporary, part-time, as long as they got that paper in their hand that said paycheck, the government, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, cut them off. And so we kept on going until 1968. The government declared Alcatraz surplus property. Well, I saw an opportunity. So when Alcatraz was declared surplus property, I said, here's an opportunity to do something on another level. So we started coming up with concepts. How If we took that island, had the island, what could we do with it? Education center, spiritual center, environmental ecology center. We had 5 different ideas on how we could utilize that island for the benefit of American Indians.
To the great white father and all his people, we, the Native Americans, reclaim the land known as Alcatraz Island in the name of all American Indians by right of discovery.
The U.S. government speaks and has spoken in the past of having Indian people control their own lives and their own destiny, and yet the proposal that we submitted to the U.S. government concerning Alcatraz was rejected. Not only was it turned down, it was never considered.
Started writing the proclamation. That proclamation was different than any other Indian tactic in history. It used satire and humor. No other event in Indian history used satire and humor as a weapon against the United States government.
Like an end to this, and I think this here manning the island of Alcatraz is a positive step in that direction. If they're going to treat us separately, then we'll remain separately.
The Indians held the island of Alcatraz for 19 months. And in the course of 19 months, we changed the course and direction of history.
We're on our way to a gig now, and I just wanted to share one thought that I've always had in me. I've always think about it. And that is, when I was 13 years old, going on the same highway to a gig, I asked myself the question, is this what music is all about? Traveling like this, going to a gig? Is this how you establish your career?
You gotta love this music to be a musician. You can't be just in it for certain monetary reasons or things like that. You gotta just love it and not expect anything of it, but being happy and making other people happy.
My dad, he asked the Lord for 3 sons. If he ever came back alive, he wanted to have a family, and he wanted 3 sons, and he wanted his sons to be musicians. So I think this is where our story began.
If you miss me today, just meet me at the corner. Just meet me at the corner, and I'll meet you. If you're crying today, just because you miss me, just meet me at the corner, and I'll kiss you. Say that you will always love me, and we'll always be together.
We're on Uni Records. It was a major label. It was a label that Hugh Masekela was on, Neil Diamond, the first label for Elton John. That was his first label. And so we got a 5-year contract, and Bill signed us. And like I say, he was just very meticulous, just a mastermind.
Each morning, look for the sun. Each morning, look what you've done.
That's it. That's right there.
Each morning, look for the sun. Each morning, look what you've done.
Yeah, they're getting warmer now.
We want to share with other people. We want our efforts to be collaborative. And I think that's when you do that, you get more out of it.
Yeah, you do.
You get more out of it. and you get other people involved, and it's part of the whole theme scenario, which we got from playing teams.
Not just one. We just got to keep, before anything, keep playing basketball, keep on the bicycle, keep active, and I think that's gonna, because without your health, you're nothing. You can't do anything. I'm very, I just really thinking about that. Just to be around, so you can be healthy for another shot at a tour, and I think it'll come if we just keep. Positive and keep loving each other and keep loving people and keep believing in the higher spirit. God he'll always open up a door. If one closes, another one's going to open.
I really feel that as a result of all this experience and being in this business so long and being still playing, that we accumulated a lot of knowledge. And I feel that our success hasn't come yet.
I want to know, how far can a person go if have given talent, which is my brothers, both equally talented, very, very talented people. How far can you go if you commit yourself to something, to a goal, and live your dream?
As far as making it, as long as you have your health, as long as you have your brothers and sisters, as long as you have love, to me, it's making it.
Perhaps it's nostalgia for a simpler time, or that for me, Clinton, Illinois was Thornton Wilder's Our Town and Norman Rockwell's illustrations for the Saturday Evening Post. I'm sure my memories have something to do with my longing to go home and to defy Thomas Wolfe, who wrote, "You can't go home again." What is it that makes living in a small town appealing? I've tried to figure out what it is about this place that has stayed in my mind after all these years. Clinton is a pleasant town with handsome buildings and pretty houses on streets lined with beautiful trees. The people are proud of their history and talk about their grandparents and great-grandparents who settled here. There's a feeling that's hard to describe, but it has to do with a closely knit community where life has a slower pace and where people call each other by their first name, take the time to stop and talk to each other, and help you in time of need. Children can ride their bikes around town where everyone knows who they are and look after them as they do their own. So I asked myself, did I come home again?